Dante wrote, "The path to paradise begins in hell." Join Deacon Prendergast and David Fortin as they discuss the tools men need to build the domestic church and the spiritual weapons to defend it. This is Through the Fire.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Through the Fire. I'm David Fortin, joined by my good buddy, Deacon Prendergast.
Hey.
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Good. Christmas is past now, and we are heading into the...
I'm sad.
I know.
I'm sad.
We're heading towards the end of the holiday season, and we've been... I've been overeating, indulging in a lot of things that probably aren't healthy for me.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah. So joining us in this episode is a good friend of mine, Jay Goodman. He is the host of the podcast, Talking with a Good Man. Wonderful show. If you ever get a chance, it's on Spotify. Jay, welcome.
Hey, Dave. Hey, Deacon. It's good to see you, talk to you guys again.
Yeah.
Yes. People don't know this, but we're actually doing this through like a video conference also. So yes, first time I'm seeing you. Pleasure to meet you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Jay, one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on was because your history and your future is based around fitness. You've been a fitness guy in the military. Just so the audience knows, you're actually Sergeant First Class Jay Goodman, soon to be retired.
U.S. Army.
Yes.
U.S. Army. Yep. Means you can run a lot.
Yes.
I probably shouldn't, but it's killing my knees.
Jay, we've been in a situation where we've been overindulging. What are some of the things that we could do to get started on that road back to physical fitness?
Right, before you start, you just need to understand that, we're old, we're tired, we're not particularly motivated to do exercises. So please, no 5 o'clock in the morning running, 10 and 12 miles, and no basic training workouts. You got to kind of tone it down for us older people.
It's much worse than that. It's 4:30 and it's a 2-minute ice plunge in 43-degree water.
Brutal.
While you're reciting as fast as you can an Our Father, a Hail Mary, and a Michael the Archangel, and then gutting out the last 20 seconds.
Oh.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding. I don't do that every day, but that's what I do. If I say it very slowly, I can get through to where there's 20 seconds left, and you can do anything for 20 seconds.
So you do the ice plunge?
I have one at home that I use.
Really?
Yeah.
That is something that I'm very interested in. I've known priests who have lived in monasteries. There's one that I'm thinking about right now who's a Franciscan, Father Jeremiah, up in Sullivan County, New York. I'm sure he still does it, where he takes ice cold showers in the morning. So it's kind of like an ice plunge. I mean, it's the same concept, but he takes ice cold showers in the morning. And, I can't bring myself to it. Is there really, really, really a benefit to it?
Oh, there's tons. Yes, there are many. Inflammation reduction, dopamine increases of sometimes 200 or 300% for hours after you're done. If you have a dopamine problem, I think all men do in some aspects, and some women, but mostly it's a man thing. If you have addictions you deal with, if you have anger, like I have 2 teen boys and I love them very deeply, but sometimes there's a nuke going off in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of why I used to, when I was a long time ago, when I worked as a police officer for the New York City Police Department, one of my assignments was as a youth officer. And I remember telling somebody, obviously, of course, any sort of cruelty towards children is unacceptable, but I can understand how a parent can lose their temper dealing with, especially adolescent children. They really like to push your buttons.
They do. And I've had times where I go out there and I jump in and I go underwater. It's about 44 degrees right now, the water. And I'll just go under and just scream under the water till it's all out and then come up and sit there. And I'm telling you, when I get out, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, I am a completely different person.
Wow.
Totally. It's almost like I've never smoked pot ever, but it's kind of what I could imagine the feeling you'd get if you did, where you're just like chill and you're like, somebody could punch you in the face and you'd be like, hey, it's all good, man.
So let me ask you this. So I remember when I was in the Air Force, one New Year's Eve, everybody was talking about doing the polar bear challenge where you jump into the ocean. And so I was stationed at Dover Air Force Base, and Rehoboth Beach is not far from Dover Air Force Base. And New Year's Eve, me and a bunch of friends, we drove down to Rehoboth Beach, and sure enough, we jumped in the ocean on New Year's Eve. And I was only in the water for probably a couple of seconds, but I couldn't breathe. I felt like my breath was taken away from me. So if I wanted to experiment with cold plunge, and obviously, I don't own a tub, could I start with using the shower? And how would you recommend somebody safely experimenting with cold plunge?
Okay, so first of all, the polar plunge is dangerous. If you've never done it, people do die. They get heart attacks. It's kind of funny when I go in, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but when I go in, I walk in very slowly and I just go up to my neck, and sometimes I'll jump in and just dive in and come up and just sit there and talk normally to people, and I'm breathing fine. But I didn't just start that day. And people are like, what the heck is wrong with you? How are you? Isn't this cold? I go, yeah, it's freezing. I want to get out. But in discomfort comes true comfort. And I get to evangelize by it and tell them, they're like, how are you doing this? And I said, well, this is years to get to where I'm at right now, breathing exercises. And so anyway, backing up. So I started with Exodus 90. And that's where I started doing the ice showers. And it was scary. It took me, the first time I ever did it was in 2023. And that was the first time I did it. And it was scary. It was very, very scary. It took about 15 minutes for me to actually get into the shower. And then I switched to bathtub because the water doesn't move once you stop moving around. And so it's not as cold feeling. Whereas the shower is the constant shower on your neck. It still works, just not as good. And so I switched to bathtub. And I got the water to about 45 degrees, and it was still very scary. It took me a long time to get in, but now I just jump in. It's not a big deal. I've done 36-degree water, and it kind of takes your breath away, but you have to learn how to get your breathing under control. Breathe everything out, 2 seconds in, 3 seconds out to start, and just really force yourself to breathe normally. Because if you start going like that, you're going to hyperventilate and pass out. And
so for somebody that wants to just like very, very, very basic beginner, do you think that it would be appropriate to start with the shower where the temperature is dialed down a little bit, where it's just at the point of being, let's say, a little uncomfortable?
Yes, it would be a good place to start. And what I would do is get in the shower, make it warm, and then just dial it down a little bit to where it's just a little uncomfortable. Spend a few minutes in there, go a little bit colder, where you can handle it, and then get out, come back the next day a little bit colder, and you'll find
a little bit at a time.
Yeah, keep working it. But I found personally, I love my shower. We had our whole house redone before we moved back, like completely gutted and remodeled. I love my shower, and it made me hate my shower and see it as a torture chamber. So I had to get an ice plunge, so I have a separate thing that I torture myself in, and see the shower as a good thing, a comfort place.
Jay, are you using this ice plunge as sort of a mortification for your body? And is there some spiritual benefit to it?
Yeah, there is. The spiritual benefit is extremely high. When you get in, it will right your soul. It really will. And it's scary, and it stinks, and it's hard, and it feels like a bunch of needles are, poking your body. It's very, very uncomfortable. But I mean, right away, you go to all the people in the Bible. I mean, nobody ever in the history of Christendom ever excelled in their walk with God when everything was going perfectly. It was always in adversity, always in chaos, always in struggles. In discomfort always came true comfort. So this is just one of those things. It's uncomfortable, but we were not meant for comfort. We were meant for true comfort, which involves a lot of discomfort. That's a good answer for you.
Yep.
As for the benefits, one of the biggest benefits it has, and there's actually 4 of them that I've kind of come across over studying it. So Susan Soberg is a person you might want to Google. She wrote the first book that's been translated in English. She's a doctor. She has studied cold water for a long, long, long time. But it improves heart health. It converts white fat to brown fat. So white fat's bad, brown fat's good. So I don't know if anybody knows this. Not all the fat in your body is bad. You need fat, but it converts white fat to brown fat. Saunas, if you can stand the heat enough, do the same exact thing that ice plunges do.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. 20 minutes on, 5 minutes off.
Now I was just thinking the white fat, brown fat. So is that understanding the difference between white fat and brown fat? Is that kind of as far as good fats and bad fats, does that correlate at all to, what is that, LDL and HDL with the cholesterol, or is that related to any of that?
Yeah, it's white fat. It stores calories, but it also performs other functions in the body. But brown fat is mainly,
As you're looking that up, one of the things that I was thinking
oh, there
about
it is.
also in regards to the practice of mortification for the
Yeah,
cold plunge, and actually probably almost any level of exercise where you're pushing yourself beyond, but it
yeah,
seems to be much more pronounced with the cold plunge. That act of mortification, when we read in scripture, even the apostles, when they went out and they came back and they were bragging to Jesus how they cast out this and they healed that, and they had that conversation where they were talking about how there was a particular demon that they couldn't get rid of, and Jesus says, "Well, some require fasting." He was
yeah,
talking about that, and I'm thinking to myself as you're describing this, the results of fasting, the self-sacrifice when you fast, it's kind of a form of mortification also, to create within yourself this experience of denial, this self-denial for the sake of Christ. And so I'm curious, when you're doing this, when you're going through this, do you put yourself in somewhat of a prayerful, meditative state where you place yourself before the cross and you're offering the suffering to Jesus? I mean, have you given that any thought?
I have. So it reminds me of a time my wife and I got into an argument. I was being prideful. I didn't see it at first, like all of us, but
Mm.
I'll speak for myself. And once I came to my senses, so to speak, I apologized to her and I said, "Now I want to do something for you to sort of was a restitution in a way. So
Okay.
I'd like to walk downstairs with you, and I'm going to get into this water while you're watching me, and I want to pray for us while I'm in that state and say some Hail Marys and Michael the Archangel." She's like, "Okay, like
Yeah.
you don't have to do that." I go, "I do. I feel called to do this." And the water was really, I think it was 35, 40 degrees. It was really,
Uh-huh.
really cold. And I got in and it just took my breath away. It was really
Wow.
cold. I had never gone below 40. And I get in and I get my breathing under control within the first 10, 15 seconds. And then she's just standing there and I start crying. And I said, "Sarah, I'm so sorry I hurt you. And I love you very much. Will you please forgive me?" She's like, "Of course I do." And she stopped thinking it was weird. She started seeing what was going on.
Right.
I did Our Father, Michael the Archangel. I actually went over 2 minutes. I think I kept going and I just said, "I'm not getting out until I'm fixed, till I'm right. And I don't want to do this to you anymore." And so I
Mm.
got out just kind of in tears and I gave her a hug and she got a little wet and from my water, but yeah, and everything was fine. And I was a completely different person. It really will right you, but it's hard. Saunas are just as hard. You spend 20 minutes in a sauna. That's not fun.
Yeah.
You start to wonder, well, which is the trade-off, 20 minutes in a sauna or 2 minutes in an ice plunge, you know?
So, I mean, Jay, what you're describing, especially in relationship to your wife, what you're describing, it calls to mind the virtue and the graces that God intends to give us men, to be the heads of the house, to be that image of Christ. It says in Ephesians, as Christ is the head of the church, the husband is the head of the family. And so when we look at that image of Christ being the head of the church, and of course, he gave his all. He died for his bride. He
Hmm.
died for the church. And so, we're not called to anything less than that. We're
Yeah.
called to exactly that same thing. And it just seems to me that, here we are, we're talking about yet another tool in the toolbox that men can use to strengthen their marriage, really fortify their home. I was having a conversation with somebody not too long ago who is struggling in their family life. I mean, really, really struggling. And it just makes it so apparent how important it is that we lay a positive foundation for our family life that comes only from Christ and the church, and then there are things that each of us can do. And I'm grateful that you're bringing to us the health and fitness component And you're bringing it to us not from a perspective of ego, because most people have that attitude. I want to look buff. I want to do this. Me, 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 me. I'm 50 plus years old. I want to look like I did back when I was 20 and the girls were all over me. It's like, that's all a bunch of crap.
Yep.
None of that matters in the big picture. None of it does. But if we can stay strong so that we can defend our homes and defend our families, if we can stay healthy so that we can be ever present, and if we can do all of this while growing in holiness and growing in virtue, I mean, we're going to send the demons running scared.
I agree. And it kind of reminds me of something. I had a vision once, not a weird vision, like a thing. I just had a thought come to my heart.
Inspired thought.
Yeah. I was talking to the guys in Hawaii. I lived there for 5 years in the Army and had a group called Brothers in Faith that I started God started it, when COVID started. But I was reading Ephesians 5:25 from my version of the St. Joseph Bible. And it says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and handed himself over for her. And I thought, handed himself. So he freely handed himself over for her. And then I thought, okay, so this is a bit morbid, but when we get married to our wives, why do we wear a black tux to our wedding? It's traditional and stuff, but you're going to your funeral.
Yes.
You're going to die. You should technically, like The Office, if you've ever seen The Office, and Dwight and Angela, when they get married, I'm spoiling this for anybody that's never seen it, but if you haven't seen it, you're crazy. But they dig graves and they both stand in their graves when they get married. And it's not accurate because he should be the only one standing in his grave. But we are. When we go to marry our wives, we're standing in our grave that day, and to that day we died. And I think that's why I don't think that's true, but I'm saying, I'm going to call it and copyright it and say that we wear black tuxes to our wedding because we are wearing our death garments.
Well, you're not far from the truth. I tell you, Jay, you're not far from it. If we dig back into ancient history and we take a look at how covenants were made between families, we play that out in the church when we get married. I mean, the way that it was back in ancient time is just like it's depicted in the Bible, where the sacrifice, you bring an animal and the animal gets split in half and opened up. I mean, truly split in half, and the guts are right there. The blood is everywhere. And then the two heads of the family will stand in the middle of the guts and face each other. And the terms of the covenant is read. And basically they are swearing to one another that I will live up to my end of this covenant agreement, or else what appears below us will become of me. When we look at our marriage rituals, the procession down that center aisle is a walk of death.
Yep.
And you have one family on one side, you have another family on the other side. You approach the altar, so now it's the two families in front of God, and the terms of the covenant are read, and that's the wedding liturgy. And truly, you're not far from this. You are voluntarily, and this is a walk of death, it's a procession. You're voluntarily saying before God and the families, what I was before is no longer. That person is dead. And the two, you and your wife, who are the ministers of that sacrament, you make the promises to each other. These are the vows. And you make the promises to each other that I'm not going anywhere. Till death do us part. I'm not leaving, and neither are you. And we're going to work through whatever comes our way, good, bad, sickness, health, rich, poor, it doesn't matter. What used to be, what we were previously, that person is no longer alive. That person is dead.
Yep.
And so you're not far from it. I agree with everything that you just said. Unfortunately, we live in a society that doesn't really recognize that, a virtuous marriage truly does mean what you once were, that person no longer exists. That person is dead. And now you're living in a new life with your spouse in Christ.
Yeah, so that's where I had to go to. And I used to be very obsessed with my body. I used to be in bodybuilding in my 20s, and I idolized Arnold. And to get to where you just said, and I'm not perfect, I still have pride, and I still deal with that with my wife.
Oh, believe me,
I'll,
I'm not
you know,
perfect either. Just ask my wife.
yeah, yeah. If we want to know our sins, talk to our wives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, let me tell you about him.
But you know what? And I know we're
They
kind of getting
wouldn't do
off
that. They
topic a
wouldn't
little
do that.
bit. I know we're getting a little bit off topic, but there's a beauty in being truly vulnerable to your spouse. I mean, this is
Yeah.
somebody that you plan on living with for the rest of your life. And of course, why not expose every rattlesnake that's hiding underneath every log? I mean, your wife needs to know. She needs to
Yeah.
know everything about you in the good and the bad and all the warts and blemishes and everything, because she's the one that's supposed to help you become a better person.
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, I don't really know how to go. But this is so awesome what you just said. It's hard to go back to the ice plunge and the benefits of it.
But
You know, I'm
the
like, I don't want to
reason,
ruin what you said. It was
no,
amazing.
but I mean, what I was inspired to say what I just said because
That was awesome.
I'm genuinely touched by the story that you told
Mm.
about you making the sacrifice for the sake of your wife through the indiscretions of your pridefulness and how it impacted you so much that it brought you to tears. And I would even go on to say those tears are a cathartic gift,
Yeah.
an absolute cathartic gift, a grace that allowed you to really dig deep and recognize and purge from yourself the behaviors that you extended, wrongfully to your wife. And I think it's a beautiful story, and I'm inspired by it. After we're done here, I may need to go take a cold shower.
But what I didn't tell you, kind of like Facebook, where you only show the perfection in your life.
Yes.
What I leave out, and I didn't mean to leave it out. I'm happy to talk about it. Is all the times I've gotten angry and didn't get into the ice plunge and just stayed in my anger.
Right.
And you go to sleep angry. You wake up. You're like, oh, and sometimes I forget. I know it sounds so stupid, but sometimes I forget that I have that option, and I'll go, oh yeah, my ice plunge. There's been nights I have ran to it. I strip down. I don't care who's in the
Yeah.
beyond my property that might see. I just get into my underwear and jump in.
Right.
I literally jump in and water flies everywhere.
Well,
And
it makes
you know,
sense that sometimes you just allow your sinfulness to get away from you. It makes sense that you're not jumping to the ice plunge all the time. I mean, as wonderful a tool as the ice plunge is for you, it certainly is not going to take the place of the sacrament of confession.
yeah,
And so, that's something that we all need to be mindful of, that, we can do things that will help us along the way. We can do things that can help us, get through the fire. Dave, you like the way I threw those two things in there?
I do like that. Yeah. Through
Yeah,
the
okay.
fire and along the way.
the ice
but
plunge
seriously.
the ice plunge would never replace confession unless the priest came over and gave me confession while I was in the ice plunge. That
Yeah,
would
well,
be.
there
And
you
then,
go.
and then what do you
that's
get for
the thing.
penance? What's your penance then? Nothing.
You got to stay in for
That
5
would be
minutes.
a brutal penance.
Yeah.
I want you to do 2 rosaries under 40-degree temperature water. That's brutal penance. That's like Middle Ages penance, when the priest or the bishop would say, I want you to go on pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Maybe you'll come back alive, maybe you won't. But if you do, then your sins were forgiven.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I think that it's beautiful. And sure, we all screw up, and it's no great mystery, and this is why we need the sacraments also.
Yeah.
Jay,
Yes.
Jay,
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned that at one point in your life you would suffered or pride was a problem for you because you were
Still is.
well, that you were into your body, you were bodybuilding, and you were obsessed with. How did you get over that? What was the point where you just said enough is enough? Tell me about that.
I'm 49, so I was back in, let's see, how old was I in 2019? If it's 46, I think, 45, something like that. I was even that way back then, just a few years ago. So I was in the Army, obviously. We had a thing called the Army Best Warrior Competition. It's like the Olympics of the Army. They choose one soldier from every battalion, and my battalion had about 120 or so soldiers in it. And my sergeant major chose me. He made me NCO of the year and sent me. And I went to a Best Warrior competition with a bunch of 20-year-olds and a couple 30-year-olds, and I'm 45, 46, and I'm smoking them. And I'm doing it to prove something to myself that I can still do it. And in doing so, I hurt myself. I tore my rotator cuff. I had 3 herniated discs, but I got 3rd place. And I shouldn't have. I should not have done that. I mean, there's a 10-mile road march. And if you've ever been to Fort Knox, or not Fort Knox. Yeah, Fort Knox, Kentucky. There's 3 roads they take you on. It's called Misery, Agony, and Heartbreak Hill. And they're about 26% incline. And it's awful. It is brutal. And they take you through all 3 of them through the 10-mile road march. And so I'm going up it. And I stopped several times and took my rucksack off and threw it down, 45-pound ruck. Angry. I'm like, I can't do this. I can't go anymore. I got blisters. I slap duct tape on it. I keep going a little bit longer. People are passing me. I'm getting really angry. And then something told me, Jason, you have to just chill out. You got to calm down. Use your nutrition you brought. Use your stuff. You have it all planned out. I worked with an Olympic athlete to manage everything down to the calorie. And so then I started doing that and I bounced back and I did it. My whole point in saying that is I hurt myself and I have never hurt myself like that before. And so I think it was my body saying, hey, Jason, stop being so obsessed with this. And then it morphed into a spiritual sense of it. And now I'm sitting here in front of you, well, talking to you because people are listening, not watching us. But now I'm pleading with people. Fitness is not, you're not supposed to idolize your body. It's not meant to get shredded and ripped, although it might be a byproduct of doing what we're probably going to talk about soon. But it's more to be closer to God and using fitness and nutrition only to get you closer to God. The fact that you might get lean and ripped and cut is just a byproduct that you shouldn't focus on.
That's all the time we have this week. Tune in next week at this same time for the conclusion of this broadcast.
Don't forget to check us out on Facebook at Through the Fire, on YouTube at Through the Fire with Deacon Don Prendergast, and Rumble at Deacon Don. Always check us out at www.castingthe.net. And if you have a show idea, go to the Through the Fire tab and you'll see a place for questions. But when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation on how guys and women can get fit.
The preceding program was a Spirit of Truth Radio Arts original program for CastingThe.net.